All right, so today we are diving into a really tangled web of documents. We're talking court cases, FBI files, old historical archives, and they all seem to circle around just two names, Parker and Wright. Now, on the surface, these records have nothing to do with one another, but some people believe they form a kind of hidden pattern, a constellation of meaning. So in this explainer, we're going to see if we can trace that pattern.
This quote right here, it comes from a central figure in our story. It's pretty enigmatic, right? But it perfectly frames what we're about to explore. This very human need to find order in chaos, to draw lines between what look like random points of light in the dark. And that idea, turning confusion into constellations, that's going to be our guide.
So who said that? Well, meet Wright. He's a YouTube personality who calls himself a mythic decoder. Wright claims that he can see a soul print hidden in what he calls fractured public records. He's the one who really started connecting the dots of this whole Parker-Wright constellation in the first place.
And this is Wright's challenge to his audience. And, well, to us. He's not asking for you to just blindly believe him. He's basically saying, do the work, check my sources, come along for the ride. So you know what? That's exactly what we're going to do. Let's test his receipts and see where this paper trail actually leads.
All right, Section 1, a fractured paper trail. We're going to start with the official story, the documents themselves. And as you're about to see, this paper trail is, well, it's less of a clear path and more like a bunch of fragments scattered all over the place.
So here's our first piece of the puzzle. It's a recent criminal complaint from Jackson County, Missouri, where a Tracy Parker is being charged with second-degree murder for a stabbing. It's brutal, it's recent, and it's a really stark, violent point in our constellation of records.
But then you get this, which is such a fascinating contrast. On one hand, you have the total chaos of a murder charge. On the other, you have the system that's supposed to process it. This is a 2020 survey for a judge in the Missouri court system. I mean, look at those ratings. 4.7 for impartiality, almost 4.8 for professional demeanor. This paints a picture of perfect, sterile, predictable order.
Okay, now let's jump back in time. Way back, over a century. The name White and White pops up, tied to a really prominent architectural firm in Kansas City. Now, it's a different spelling, sure, but it sounds the same. It's another echo, this time from the city's historical archives, and it has absolutely nothing to do with crime.
In this timeline, this really shows you the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. This is not one single story. It stretches almost 70 years, from an abduction in Mississippi back in '59, to a murder case in Georgia in '07, a Second Amendment appeal in Florida in 2024, and then back to that murder charge in Missouri. Different states, different generations, all somehow linked by that name, Parker.
Let's zoom in on that oldest point, from 1959. The source for this is a declassified FBI file, and it is incredibly fragmented. It talks about the violent abduction of a man named Parker from a county jail, but so much of the official record is just unreadable or blacked out. It's like a ghost in the archives.
Section 2, connecting the constellations. So, we've got all these fractured pieces. Now, following Wright's lead, we're going to start looking for the patterns, the echoes, that might link these events that seem totally random.
And to do that, you've got to understand Wright's core idea. He calls it paper versus plume. See, the paper identity is clean, right? It's just names, dates, official orders. But reality, what he calls the plume, is messy. He says it spreads and splits and drifts through layers you can't even see. This is the lens he uses to find his patterns.
And here is a perfect example of this in action. The paper version is a generic term like domestic conflict, but the plume, taken right from the 2007 Parker v. State Court case, shows you the grim reality, a documented history of abusing the victim both verbally and physically. See? That's the messy truth that's hiding under the clean label.
The plume gets even darker when we go back to those 1959 FBI files. The language is so raw because it's pulled directly from an eyewitness. 4 men had each leg and one arm. I could see the bare hide. He was bleeding. I mean, this is not an orderly report. It's a snapshot of pure, raw violence.
And another witness account just reinforces that chaos. Parker fought back and broke away, and his attackers literally picked up a garbage can and threw it at him. This is the messy, violent reality that official records so often try to smooth over or just black out entirely. It's the story you find when you start looking for the plume.
Section 3, the architecture of belief. So this all raises a much bigger question, doesn't it? Why do people like Carnage Wright feel this need to look for these kinds of patterns? Why build these elaborate constellations in the first place? To get that, we need to zoom out and look at the architecture of belief itself.
So academics actually have a term for this kind of pattern seeking: pseudo-archaeology. It's defined as ideas that are formed by distrust, based on minimal evidence, and are used to explain the past. And the key part of that definition, the real takeaway here, is the starting point: distrust of the official story.
And you know, that distrust has really fertile ground to grow in. These alternative narratives, they pop up when people just don't trust official systems, when they can't get their hands on verified information, and when they're surrounded by misinformation. But ultimately, it really speaks to a fundamental human need to find patterns in chaos, especially when the official story just feels incomplete.
And this quote, this gets right to the heart of that systemic distrust. When people start seeing judges as politicians in robes, just enforcing their own politics, their faith in the entire paper trail, the whole official record, it just starts to erode.
And that's really why this matters so much. When you have a climate of deep institutional distrust, the ground becomes incredibly fertile for these alternative explanations to grow. When that official record seems flawed, it doesn't just create a vacuum. It creates an opening for people to start charting their own constellations.
Okay, section 4, paper, plume, or ghost. This brings us right back to where we started. So what are we looking at here? Is there a genuine, hidden plume connecting all these events? Is it all just a coincidence on paper? Or is the unreliable record itself the whole story, a ghost in the machine?
And that's the ultimate question, isn't it? What is the actual truth of the Parker-Wright connection? The thing is, with so many conflicting and fragmented pieces of information, the sources we've looked at, they just don't give us a definitive answer.
And maybe a definitive answer is impossible, because the official record itself is so often incomplete or redacted or full of contradictions. That's not a reliable record. It's a ghost.
I mean, when we break it all down, the problem becomes crystal clear. The court cases, they're often contradictory. The government files, they're highly fragmented. And the historical archives, they seem completely disconnected from everything else. Each source of truth is flawed in its own way, making one single coherent story basically impossible to build.
Which leaves us with this one last provocative question. When that paper trail crumbles, when it's incomplete, contradictory, or you just plain can't believe it, what's left? Are we all just left to connect our own dots, to become our own mythic decoders and chart our own constellations in the dark?